Hi there. I thought I'd give you a little insight today on how to build a computer. Okay, let's get started. Now, this is my backup computer, and I had it sitting on a stool behind me at my other computer desk, and I backed up from my main computer desk and bumped it with a chair and knocked it off so it fell maybe 2 foot. You can look at the case and see what it done. It bent the front and it bent the side out. Needless to say, this is a cheap case. So what I decided to do was to replace that. No much further than it fell, it should not have done this kind of damage, and it should not have warped the case. Of course, when you buy a case online, you're just taking a chance on the quality of the case. You're buying something that looks good to you at the time. And unfortunately, this is a thin, cheap case. So I'm purchasing a known good case to take the parts out of and put in it. So I purchased an Antec 900, which I've used before. These are very good cases. They're thick, they're good quality, have a lot of cooling capacity, and I didn't want to run into this problem again, so I purchased a good case. Now, it's expensive, it's not cheap. This thing cost 125 bucks. But it's a lot better than this $50 case that I just tore up by knocking it over. So anyhow, I'm pulling all the guts out of it, laid it on the table, let you see everything in it, and then we'll put it in this 900. Okay, let's go. Okay, everything's laid out. We got the motherboard, the RAM, the CPU cooler and fan, hard drives, DVDs, power supply. We've got the new case, and we're fixing to start installing everything. Motherboard, very crucial to a good computer. This is ASUS M5A99X EVO R2. Is a very good motherboard. It has a lot of features that are desirable. For instance, if you look at the bottom left hand side, you'll see that it has 2 USB ports for your keyboard and mouse. And it has one PS2 should you have a keyboard or mouse that only has a PS2. So you can use that one. It also has 3.0, USB 3.0, very desirable because it's much faster, a lot higher transfer rate. It also has the capacity for 32 gigabytes of RAM, should you need that. For 2 video cards, if you're a gamer and want to slave two together. But it's got lots and lots of good features that if you use your computer a lot, you're going to need a lot of them. So the first thing we do is we build our motherboard to go in the case. First thing we put on our motherboard is our CPU. Okay, we're running AMD FX 4130 quad core CPU running at 3.8 gigahertz. Now what does quad core mean? It means that it's not one CPU, it's actually 4 CPUs in one. So it makes it a lot faster. The speed of your computer is based on the CPU. How fast is your CPU? Now I've got it face down and with a pin sticking up. And each one of them little pins you see is like a little needle. They got to go into a slot on the motherboard. Be careful, do not bend these pins. About the cheapest CPU you're going to find is $100. They're up to $1,000. You bend these little pins, makes it useless, and you can no longer use it. You don't want to do that. Okay, your CPU is going to produce a lot of heat, especially a 4-core. So you got to get that heat away from the CPU as quick as you can. In order to do that, we use a heat sink with a brass core, as you can see. The white stuff on the bottom that you see is grease. It forms a surface between the CPU and the heat sink to help draw that heat away. Then the heat goes up into the heat sink, which is a radiator of type. The heat will go there. Then there's a fan on top of the radiator to draw that heat out and get rid of it so that your CPU is not damaged. If you don't have proper cooling on the CPU, your CPU would just shut your computer down because it cannot handle heat. It's got to get rid of it. Okay, this is your fan sitting on top of your heatsink, drawing that heat off of your CPU. Now, just a little plastic fan. However, depending on the quality of the heatsink fan that you've got, some has more than one speed, and it has sensors on the motherboard to where if the heat gets to a certain extent, then it'll kick it up into a higher gear and make the fan spin faster in order to get that heat off of the CPU to dissipate it rapidly. Okay, the next thing we want to install on the motherboard is our RAM. Now, RAM means random access memory. Alright, it does two things. It also determines the speed of your computer, but it also determines how much multitasking you can do. The more RAM you've got, the more capacity that you have for doing more than one thing. On my main computer, when I'm writing stuff, a lot of times I have 3 or 4 programs going at one time, and it's actually working on its own while I'm doing something else. But all this uses RAM. Now, the RAM I'm using here is very good. I'm using 16 gigabytes with a speed of 89924 and running at 1.5 volts. Now, I'm not going to try to explain all that to you. You'll have to look it up on the internet. But it all has to do with speed. Okay, so now we have our RAM and our CPU installed on our motherboard. One thing I failed to tell you is that the RAM also has a heat sink. This is something that helps draw heat away from the RAM. The RAM is inside of a heat sink or like a radiator. Now, there's no fan on it. It just uses the case fan, which blows by to get rid of the heat from the RAM, but it does have its own heat sink. So now we have the motherboard prepared to go into the computer case. It has to bolt in, and I'll explain all that to you as we go. But the first thing you need to do is get your motherboard ready so that when the case is ready for it, all you need to do is to bolt it in there. Okay, now our CPU fan is electric, so it has to be plugged into the motherboard. You've got 2 plugs side by side there, about middle of the picture. The bottom one, toward the bottom, is the CPU fan, or your primary. Now, some CPUs can have 2 fans. If so, and they're hooked up separately, then you use the top one for your second fan. If not, you can use that for a case fan. Now, the CPU also has its own power supply. It cannot run off of a parallel circuit. It has to have its own power supply. And if you look at the bottom there, you'll see that it does have its own power supply. I should have told you to go ahead and hook your fan up to the motherboard, and then you're ready to go. You always want to do as much as you can put on your motherboard before you put it in your case. Because once you put it in your case, it can be, you can have interference from something else in your case that may prevent you, or at least make it harder for you to do something to the motherboard. So if you can do it with it laying on the table, you always want to do that. Now then, our motherboard is ready to go in. Now, the next thing you want to do is to build the front of your case. You always want to do that before you put your motherboard in, because you don't want to be putting stuff in and out, dragging it across the top of your motherboard and taking a chance on tearing up something that's already on your motherboard. So you take your case and you go ahead and install your DVDs, your card readers, your hard drives, and everything in the very front part of your case. Now, if you get a good quality case, as I did, Your case will come with all the hardware and the accessories that you'll need to build your case with. This is the hardware to bolt your hard drive in, to bolt your motherboard down, to bolt your modules. You got two modules that goes in the front. To bolt your modules in, like I say, everything comes with it if you buy a good quality case. Now, something here I want you to know that you'll only find in a good quality case. If you have something that's a 3-inch, you need to put in a 5-inch slot, such as a card reader, which I do. Then it comes with a little adapter so that you can actually put it inside the adapter and slip the adapter into the case and make it work in a 5.5 slot, which we're going to need to do. If it's a cheap case, it will not come with this. Now, something else that shows you that it's a quality case, the black plastic piece you see at the bottom right side of this picture, the motherboards come in actually 3 different sizes: a mini, a regular, and a full. You'd rarely see a full anymore. What you see is the mini and the regular. Now, this motherboard I have is regular, but should it be mini, I could take this little black plastic thing and bolt it to my case, and it'd give my video card a place to rest so it wouldn't be out in the middle of the air, because my motherboard wasn't long enough to support it. And so that's quality. Now I've got both the right and the left sides off of the new case, and you can see where the motherboard is actually going to be mounted there. Now, something else that shows you that this 900 is a quality case, at the top of the case it has a 200 millimeter fan to pull the heat out of the top of the case. Now, that's about the biggest fan I've ever seen on a case. I don't believe I've ever seen anything bigger than a 200 millimeter. But again, this shows that it's quality. Now, this case comes from the factory with 2 120 millimeter fans in the front, 1 120 millimeter fan in the rear, and 1 200 millimeter fan in the top. A lot of your cases will come to you with no fans in it, and you've got to install everything yourself. Now, this case has 3 5.25 slots in the front. One of those we'll use with a DVD. One of them we'll use with an adapter and our card reader. One of them we won't use. Okay, underneath that, it has 2 modules. Each module has a 120 millimeter fan, and it has 3 slots so you can install 3 3.5-inch items in there, like hard drives. So you could actually put 6 hard drives in this computer if you wanted to. Now, after you get your 2 modules in front built like you want them, with your hard drives in them or whatever, then all you got to do is just slide them in with your hand, line it up with everything on the front, and then start your side bolts. That's the black ones that you see there, that will actually mount it to the case on both the left side and the right side. Now, you want to go ahead and take your Phillips screwdriver, and that's how you tighten these things up. And you want to go ahead and tighten them up, both sides, so that you don't have to come back to that point. But as you can see, I'm shooting this one from the back, and you can see I've got 2 hard drives in that top module. In the bottom module, I don't have anything. Now, after you get all of your module hardware tight, I'm assuming that you've already got your DVD and all that stuff tight, which I'd always do that first. But after you get everything tight, then you need to go ahead and install your left side, because you're going to be laying the case on its left side to install the motherboard. But you need to make sure that everything is tight on the front, on your modules and all, before you do that. So, Now we've got everything tight. Everything's in the front. Modules are in. We got our left side on it. We've got the bolts in the back for our left side. So now we're ready to lay the computer down to install the motherboard. Okay, there is a motherboard plate that comes with the motherboard that goes into the case. You need to have a look at your motherboard and to see how it's going to lay in the case so you'll know how to install the plate in the case itself. The plate must first be installed into the case, and then you lay the motherboard in and slide it up, and the parts is going to protrude through the plate so that you can have access to that motherboard from the outside. Will need to line up, and then you can put your bolts in and bolt your motherboard down. Okay, now we've got the computer case laid on its left side. We've got the motherboard plate installed inside the case. If you look at the arrow, it points right to the motherboard plate where it is actually installed inside the case itself. Okay, now we've got to set our case up for our particular motherboard. Now the case generally comes set up for a mini, which this case did. And that means that the studs for the motherboard, the first two, are already installed, but the outer three for the mid-side motherboard, which mine is not installed. So I've got to install them myself to prepare it for when I put the motherboard in there. Okay, this is the little stud that screws into your case that your motherboard will lay on, and then screws will go through your motherboard and into these little studs. Now in order to install these little studs, you're going to need a 3/16 wrench, and just screw them in with your hand and take your wrench and snug them real good. So now just take your motherboard, lay it inside the case, slide it through your motherboard plate, get it aligned with the studs, install 9 screws through all of the places on the motherboard, and tighten everything good with a Phillips screwdriver. Now then, it's time to install your power supply. In this particular case, the power supply goes at the bottom of the case. A lot of them, the power supply go in the top of the case. I prefer the bottom myself, because I'd like all my weight to the bottom if I can get it. But anyhow, go ahead and install your power supply, and then we're ready to go from there. So this is the picture after your motherboard has been installed into your case. You can look to the right hand top side and you see that the DVD is installed. You got 2 hard drives installed. At the bottom you got your power supply installed, and you got your motherboard installed. So now then, we got to start hooking stuff to the motherboard to make everything compatible. So the first thing you want to hook to the motherboard is your case fans. Now, they can come in 2 different ways. It can be a 3-pin hookup, which means it'll go directly to the motherboard, or it can be a large 4-pin hookup, which means it goes to the power supply somewhere. In our case, ours are 3 pins. So I took a yellow pin and I've circled where all our plugs are, our 3-pin plugs, so that we can hook up all of our case fans to our motherboard. That's where they're going to receive their power from, so that they can run and keep the computer cool. So you hook them up first. They're the most simple. Then the next thing you do, if you look at the top, that's your main power hookup to your motherboard. Top, a little bit left of center, the long blue slot. That's where your main power goes to your motherboard. That supplies everything there except the CPU. It's down on the front left, as I showed you once before. Now we need to hook up our front panel stuff. Now what I'm talking about is how you control your computer from the outside. You'll have an on and off switch, you'll have a reset switch, all that type of stuff. HDD lead, I'm holding that in my hand right here. Now again, if you got a quality case, it'll come with a little block, and the wires are small. So you put it on the little block, and it will make it much easier to install because the little block can only go on the motherboard in one way. So if you pull all your little wires up and hook them to this little block that the motherboard sends with it, uh, then it's real easy to hook up. If not, then it may or it may not work, or you may have to play with it because each hookup has got a positive and a negative, and if you get them reversed, it's not going to work. The thing about a computer is everything's got to be perfect or it don't work. It's as simple as that. It's right or it don't work. Now, if you look at the top right side, the long white area is where that you hook the front panel up to. So if you got all your little wires and everything hooked on your little jumper, then all you need to do is just stick it on to your motherboard, and you're good to go. All your front is hooked up. Of course, you also have mic and sound, which comes over underneath that kind of long blue slot, but that's no big deal. That's easy to find. It's easily marked. Of course, now your motherboard comes with a book, and so if you have a question as to how to hook up anything, then you can always refer back to your motherboard book, and it'll show you where the stuff is at and how to hook it up. It's pretty simple. Okay, now after we've got that done, the only thing remaining is to hook up the rest of your power cables. So you're going to have a power cable at each item. One to the DVD, one to the card reader, and to your video card when you hook it up, which that will be our next step. Okay, so here's our video card. Now all we've got to do is to insert that into the motherboard in the proper slot and put 2 bolts in the case holding it down, and then we're good to go. Now this is the one I was referring to where if you used a mini motherboard, it's got that piece of plastic that you can actually bolt to the case where the motherboard would normally go, and it would support the end of this video card so it's not sticking in the air and it don't get warped with heat and things of that nature. Okay, so this shows the video card installed onto the motherboard. Now, video card is something else that cannot be hooked parallel because it requires too much power draw. So it's got its own hookup. So you have to hook it up off the power supply using its own hookup so it can have direct power from the power supply. But now then, everything is hooked up. All we need to do now is position our wires, meaning making sure that none is touching the blades of any fans, and taking wire ties or whatever you want to use, plastic ties, and getting everything out of the way so that nothing will hit. Okay, now this is something I do to all of my computers. Of course, you don't have to, but I build all the computers in my house. I've got 3 kids. I build all the computers in their houses. And I've got sister-in-laws that I build computers for, and this, that, and the other. And now when they tear up, where do you think they're going to take them? They're going to bring them back to me, and I got to fix them. And so, number one, you can't just look at something and tell what it is, because the manufacturer has his own markings. So while I got everything available, I make a tag of what I got in there, and I staple it, or not staple it, I tape it to the inside of the door so that when I pull that door off, I know what's in it. Now, something else I do, being as I have to keep up with so many computers, I number my computers. As you've seen before, this one I'm working on now is number 11, which you got a number on the outside. Also, I don't care how good the people used it are, eventually you're going to have to reload the operating system. It's going to get a malignant virus or something cost you to do that. So you're going to need a place to store all your drivers connected with that tower motherboard and all. And you don't want to have to guess at nothing. You don't want to have to go to the internet and look everything up every time you work on something. So You can get these little books right here at Walmart for $10, and you can put all your driver CDs or DVDs inside them. But put all your driver CDs or DVDs inside, zip them up, put them away, and store them. And when you need it again, you know where it's at. Now, the two I'm showing here are the two that you're always going to need. That on the right is your motherboard CD or DVD. It's got all the drivers. It drives everything on your motherboard. The one on the left is your video card driver. Now, also, you'd want to put your operating system in there, like if you got Windows 7, you want your CD and stuff in there. But you know, the next time you load it, you might want to change that operating system. You might want to go to 8.1 or whatever. But these two you'll always have to use. So you want to keep up with all that, and you want to have it all in the same place. So now our computer is ready. All we got to do is put on our right side door, bolt it on there, or screw it on there with a Phillips screwdriver, and we're ready to fire it up and go. So now we're ready to go back online again. Normally at this time you'd have to load your operating system, your virus protection, things of that nature. But being that all we did was change the case, we don't have to do that. All I have to do is just hook it up and go, because the operating system and everything is already loaded in the other case. So all I did was take everything apart and put it back together in a brand new case. So installing the operating system, that'll be another video. Okay, to build your computer, the software that you will need, you're going to have an operating system. That would either be Windows or Linux. You're going to have antivirus system. That would be most likely Semtex Endpoint or McAfee. Now there's others running around out there, but those two, in my opinion, are about the best. And also, you're probably going to need some type of office program, and that'll get you by. Now, I don't endorse any of these. I've used them all. All of them's got their good points and their bad points. But, you know, I've been happy and sad with both. So it just depends on your preference, what you would like to use. But that's about it for this CD. I appreciate you watching. Put your comments where they go, and I'll answer any questions I can for you. Again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.